All right, hello everyone. So today I think it will be a bit different because we are going to watch a video. I think it's connected to everything, to God and to the message of today. It's a bit surprise. So I don't know if you remember, the older people will remember Whoopi Goldberg, the actress of Sister Act. So she managed to have an appointment with the Pope, a meeting with the Pope, and so she shares her experience. Then I will explain why I chose this interview. I think it's connected to the gospel of today. Anyway, okay, so I watched this video a short time ago with the university students in Sydney, and I found it very interesting because it gives us tips about our mission, because we are really called to attract all sorts of people. So I know that many people in Australia especially criticize for Pope Francis because they say it's too liberal and all that. I don't know, but the only thing I know is that he really has a point, the point of really wanting to reach out to everyone, no matter what. And so I think it's very touching when you see people like Whoopi Goldberg, who is completely far from the church. She's got a very wide life, and the other girls there, I suppose, more or less the same. But they're all looking for God. Deep inside, everybody is looking for God. And that is the certainty we have to start from when we meet any people. Everybody needs and looks for God. And so we can really have another attitude towards each person, no matter how different the person is from us. And that's the connection with the readings of today. So the readings of today talk about leprosy, which is a specific disease. We don't have much today. In some countries, it's still around actually. But it's important to show all people with all sorts of diseases, spiritual, physical, psychological diseases, to show and to prove what Whoopi Goldberg said here. Up there, someone likes me, someone loves me, because that is the door how people can open themselves to change as well. We surely have to present the truth to all people and to lead them back to the church, to live according to the gospel and all that. But it's so important that each person can feel that there is place for him, for her, still in the church, in heaven. And so the mission we are called to do is really modeled on the compassion and mercy that Jesus showed to everybody. And so the readings of today really question our lives. And the first reading seems to us maybe very far from our reality, but it's not. I remember during COVID, I don't know about here, but in Australia, they were very, very, very strict. So if someone had COVID, it was the same. Everybody cried, unclean, unclean, and nobody could approach that person anymore. The person was isolated. And in Italy, I'm from Italy, my region in Lombardy, it was the most hit at the beginning of COVID. And so I remember my friends, my relatives couldn't go anywhere in Italy because they were the lepers of the country. But there are other sorts of leprosies we can also, with which we can stigmatize people. And so, for example, disabled people, we can still marginalize them or just not to have to do much with them because they're not so it's not so comfortable to be with them, or we can bully them, we can mock them. Or people, for example, people with mental issues. I don't know about here, but I mentioned in the other day in Australia, in many Western countries, in Italy too, there are so many people with mental issues of different sorts, and it's not easy to be and to deal with them. So without realizing, we can marginalize people, and also all people who are different from us in all senses, who don't live according to our criteria, to our rules. We have all of us, people we don't like, people we have problems with, people who are very different from us. Without realizing, we can somehow marginalize them and to cry, unclean, unclean. I don't want to have anything to do with that person because it's not very comfortable for me to be with that person, to deal with that person. So this reading is really relevant for all of us. And just recently, well, it's been a while, but now it's very serious in my family. One of my nephews had a very bad breakdown. He's only 23 years old. But like many young people in our world today, don't have a direction in life, don't have a meaning, and the faith is not so popular anymore. So they don't know how to handle their traumas, their problems, how to find a goal in their lives. So people are very weak, very fragile. We all have a lot of flaws, as Whoopi Goldberg also said. It's true. We really need to be compassionate. One of my brothers had also a breakdown long time ago. So when my nephew so felt bad, he was telling us, all of us have a little bit of depression and anxiety, which are very common these days. But the important thing is to keep it to the norm, not to try to not be overwhelmed by that. But we all have deep wounds we need to heal. And so in this sense, we are not different from anyone. And so people who seem to us complicated are actually very, very similar to us deep inside. And so Pope Francis really has tried over and over again to have to instill in us a different attitude. I'm talking as a priest. I'm the first to be very like structured sometimes, and I know the rules of the church. I know all the norms, all the catechism. I'm sure you know as well. But sometimes people come with very complicated situations, with very irregular situations, as we usually say. People come to confession, come to talk, and you can't just tell them the rules like a book on their head, like a brick over their heads. You have to listen, to deeply listen to them, and to try to understand them, and to not be scandalized by anything, because we are not better than them. And that is exactly the attitude that Jesus had in the gospel of today. Probably we heard this gospel many times, but it's always very, very touching, because it's really how Jesus breaks all the rules, the external rules of that time, as he usually does. So we know that in that time, a leper couldn't approach anybody, and people just tried to be faithful to the rules of the Old Testament. So it was unthinkable that a leper could approach, especially a spiritual master like Jesus. And moreover, as we know, the Jews thought that all sorts of diseases were directly linked with sin. So people were punished because of their sins. So people like lepers and all other sick people were marginalized, because the Jews thought they were punished by God, or either because of themselves or because of their families. And so Jesus breaks all these rules, and he let this man approach him. So this man, as we heard, he pleaded on his knees. He came to Jesus and pleaded on his knees. So this man had probably seen how Jesus treated all the sick. Last week, the gospel was about the very beginning of the mission of Jesus. And Jesus accepted, welcomed all the sick, all the possessed, without any refrain, any fear. And yes, so this man had probably seen how Jesus treated the sick. So he had the intuition that Jesus would not reject him, and Jesus would be merciful towards him. And it's a bit, again, like Whoopi Goldberg, who had this intuition that Pope Francis wouldn't reject her, and that maybe there was a word for her too. So I think this is what we are called to do as missionaries, as disciples. Many times we scare people with our attitudes, with our very righteous, I don't know, behaviors. But people really need to trust us and to have that intuition that they will be welcomed by us, that we will have a word of consolation, of hope for them. And so I think we have to learn a lot from Jesus. It's not only, again, a matter of doing an external mission, but of assimilating the inner attitudes of mercy, of compassion that Jesus had towards everybody. And so this man, as I said, wasn't afraid of approaching Jesus. And also, he was very humble when he said to Jesus, if you want, you can cure me. So we don't know if this man was a big sinner. Maybe he was. We don't know if he was a practicing Jew, but definitely he was very humble. He realized that maybe he tried to solve his problem in different ways, but nothing worked out. So he was humble enough to understand that he couldn't control his situation, that he had to hand it over to God, and that God had the right to solve his problem in the way and in the time when he judged the best. So if you want, you can cure me. So he didn't demand from God the solution of all his problems straight away, but he knew that he could cure him, and he knew that God had the time and everything in his hands. So I think we have to learn a lot from this leper as well, especially about humility, about the fact that we are not self-sufficient, and there are so many situations, so many problems as well that we can't handle by ourselves. We can't control. We need to hand them over to God. And then the passage says, in my translation at least, it says that Jesus was sorry, felt sorry for him. So the original Greek is something like that Jesus was gutted. So he really felt deep inside, he felt the suffering of this person. And that is so important. Instead of judging other people, we are called to feel their suffering, even the suffering when they are in sin, when they are in a very bad spot, when they're very far from God. It's the worst suffering. I think we all experience that in some moment of our lives when we maybe were very far from God. It's the worst, the saddest situation we can experience. And many people are still there. And so Jesus feels that suffering. I can tell you again, my talking with my sister over the last few days, knowing that her son is such a bad crisis, I can't imagine. I see how my sister really suffers for her son. And there is a sense of compassion, of solidarity that really reveals the deepest love we can have for someone. And Jesus is the one who understands us, who is close to us more than anyone else. But we are also called to show that closeness, that compassion, that solidarity. And only in that way, people will open themselves to God, because they will understand that God loves them no matter what. So Jesus overcomes, as I said, all the rules, and he touches this leper, which was really against all the healthy and religious norms of the time. But he didn't care. He wanted to show this leper his closeness, his solidarity, his mercy. And again, we can remember COVID times. Nobody could touch anybody. Nobody could drink from the same cup or chalice in the mass. But God really goes beyond that. Love is more important than all rules, all fears, overcomes all fears. I remember Saint Francis. I really love Saint Francis. Is my favorite saint in general, not because he's Italian, but because it's a great example of closeness to Jesus, of like imitation of Christ. So maybe you remember, just before he started his consecrated life, he met a leper on the road. He was very like fussy. He was a very wealthy man, and he hated lepers. And he said, at the end of his life, he wrote, "When I was in sin, the sight of lepers nauseated me beyond measure. But then God himself led me into their company, and I had pity on them." So just before his final conversion, he saw a leper on the road, and he hugged him. And he saw that Jesus was in that leper. I think I'm very fussy too. I was a missionary in Russia for a long time, and we used to help a little bit, at least the homeless over there, because especially in Moscow, many people go to Moscow to find a job, but then the cost of life is very high, so many people end up in the street. And to be a homeless in Moscow with -20, -30 is quite bad. And I remember on New Year's Eve, we went there to celebrate New Year's Eve with the homeless. And one brother of my community, I remember, he really impressed me, because we shared with them some hot soup, some cake, something. But then this missionary hugged the homeless. I was very shocked, because the homeless there are super dirty, super really you can smell them from far away, and they can really transmit to you many diseases of all kinds. But this missionary wasn't afraid, because he really saw Christ in those people, and those people were so grateful. We just celebrated New Year's Eve with them. Nobody else would have celebrated that with them. So just to pay a bit of attention to them, to give them a little bit of joy, apart from the food, just that someone really cared for them, brought a bit of joy, a bit of light in their lives. And this is what we are called to do with all sorts of people. Again, not only with homeless. If God calls us that too, why not with the poor? But there are all sorts of poverties. And as I said, there are many people we can be very suspicious of, and we can really be distant from. So we need to break those walls and shed a bit of light on the lives of so many people who need that light, the light of Christ. So the passage also, yeah, the other thing that really touches me in this passage is when Jesus says, responds to the leper's request. In my translation is of course I want to. You had here, I do want it, or I do will it. So Jesus really wants to heal all our diseases, all our spiritual diseases at least. Maybe the physical diseases, our external problems sometimes have to stay there. Maybe they're useful for us somehow, but Jesus definitely wants to heal all our spiritual diseases, and he wants us to be healthy, to be more and more similar to him, to love like him, to feel like him, to really to be merciful like him. He wants to heal all our traumas, all our wounds, and in a very deep way. And he can do that. He's powerful to do that because he shows us this unconditional and eternal love. And that is what really heals us deep inside. It's a process. I'm still, every day, every moment, I see a void in me, like wounds in me, and I constantly need to go back to the Lord and to believe that he loves me unconditionally, he forgives me everything, and that is what heals me. It's a process, but there are also some special moments when we can experience that in a very deep way, like confession, like, I don't know, some retreat, some pilgrimage. But we need to experience more and more this unconditional and eternal love that God has for each one of us. It's the only way we can be healed. And so we are called to show everybody that unconditional and eternal love. Maybe it's just a way of the Son. The Son is Christ. It's not us. But our contribution is so important. And yeah, just to finish, I connected to that. I often remember when I was a young missionary a long time ago. I was still studying theology. I was in Rome. I was in my country for a few years. And I remember we had a one-day retreat. And it was for the youth mostly, but yeah, there were a bit of everything. And all of a sudden, a teenager boy, he was around 15 years old, came accompanied by someone else. So he was basically drawn by I don't know, I can't remember if it was his sister or someone of his family brought him to the retreat. But this guy didn't have a clue. He was completely against the church. He had the cross upside down. He had the shirt of Marilyn Manson. He was doing magic, so completely against the church. And so he was there like really, like he didn't want to be there at all. He was like rebelling all the time. But something happened in that only one day of retreat. He saw something, he understood he experienced something, some love, which he hadn't received in his family. Later on, I found out he had a very broken family, and that's why he ended up in those satanic circles or whatever, wherever he was. And so he took a long time for him to leave that. But strangely enough, he started coming to our to our house there in Rome, and he came just to hang out with us, with the missionaries, to talk a little bit, to play together soccer or whatever. But little by little, he, especially one other brother of mine, accompanied him with a lot of patience, with a lot of love. And in the end, he went together with us to a mission trip to the south of Italy. And finally, in that contest, he confessed, and he really had a conversion. And it took a long time even to be liberated, because he had even some demonic influence or something. It took a long time to be completely liberated. But then I thought how that unconditional love, that eternal patience really of that missionary, especially with him, that trust really changed this young man. And then he shared with us afterwards, he shared how at the beginning, he didn't understand much about us, about our lifestyle, but he saw that the missionaries were living with someone. That is what he shared. And I found it very touching that if we really live with God, people will notice his presence, his loving presence. And that is, again, what will change them and heal them. So yeah, just that. Today, I invite myself to really deepen in this experience of healing that Jesus wants to do in each one of us first. Like this leper, we constantly need this healing, and we need to be humble like this leper once again. And then let's ask Jesus to really look at each person with these eyes full of compassion, of love, of hope, despite everything, of trust, despite everything. And in that way, many more people will come back to the church, will come back to God. So we have some questions, so we'll put them later, or how does it work with the questions? Shall we read them, or? Oh, I don't know. You will read, okay. Shall I read out the questions? Are there people I marginalize in my life? How can I overcome that barrier? Do I feel compassion for people who are suffering, no matter if it's for their sins? How can I understand better their problems and circumstances? Do I believe that Jesus certainly wants to spiritually heal me and everyone? How can I incarnate his unconditional and endless love for everybody? These questions are just some tips, but yeah, the most important thing is really to stop at the verse where Jesus really touches our hearts and wants to heal our hearts.